They toasted to my death at my own birthday party. I was standing there holding a slice of dry chocolate cake on a plastic plate when my eldest son raised his glass and said, with a laugh that was just a little too loud, "To Grandma's last one." Everyone laughed. Even my daughter, who used to braid my hair when she was little, giggled behind her wine glass. I looked around the room. Faces I had fed, clothed, loved. Every single one of them smiling as if this was the most amusing joke they had ever heard. They weren't joking. That was the worst part. They meant it. This was my 83rd birthday. I never expected grandeur, just warmth. A few years ago, we would have celebrated with real food, music, dancing in the living room. I remember cooking for hours, making sure everyone had their favorite dish. My grandson loved my lentil soup. My daughter-in-law adored my strawberry pie. But this year, there was nothing homemade. Store-bought cake, lukewarm drinks, and a sense that I was no longer central to their lives. Just a placeholder, a relic they were waiting to replace. I had heard the whispers for months. They thought I couldn't hear because my hearing is fading. But oh, how they underestimate the sharpness of an ignored woman. I caught fragments. Assisted living, too much for us. She's just not safe alone anymore. My house, the one I built with my husband brick by brick, where every photo on the wall holds decades of laughter and loss, was now a burden in their eyes. And me? I was just in the way. The truth is, I've always known I didn't quite fit in with this new version of my family. Ever since my husband passed 10 years ago, things changed. At first, they checked in on me. Weekly calls, Sunday lunches, then monthly, then birthdays. Eventually, I became that obligation you check off the list. I should have seen this coming. But hope is stubborn. And mothers, even old, tired ones, keep hoping their children will remember love the way they once knew it. That night after the toast, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even speak. I smiled, nodded, and ate that dry piece of cake. I let them believe I was clueless, that the hearing aid wasn't working, that I had missed the meaning behind their laughter. But inside, something cracked. And once something breaks, really breaks, it never fits back the same. After everyone left, I washed the dishes alone. The kitchen still smelled faintly of wine and disappointment. I looked at the calendar on the fridge. 3 appointments circled in red. 2 were doctor visits. The 3rd was a mysterious meeting scheduled by my daughter. I had asked what it was for. She waved me off, said it was just a routine checkup. But I had a feeling it was more than that. I'm old, not stupid. The next morning, I pretended to forget. That's what they expect, after all. Senility. Confusion. Let them think I'm slipping. Let them underestimate me. It's the best camouflage an old woman can wear. I made tea, sat by the window and waited. Sure enough, my daughter came by early. She didn't even look me in the eye as she talked. She told me to get dressed. Said we had a long day ahead. I asked where we were going. She changed the subject. I played along. Wore the beige sweater she liked. Brushed my thinning hair. Put on the soft shoes. I followed her to the car and sat quietly as we drove. She made small talk. About the weather, the traffic, the neighbor's new dog. But I could feel it in my bones. Today wasn't just a checkup. Today was a turning point. I didn't know how yet, but I knew something was ending. We pulled up to a gray building with no sign. Just a long white ramp and windows that didn't open. A woman in scrubs greeted us. My daughter smiled tightly, said, "This is just for a tour, Mom. No pressure." I nodded. I had no intention of making a scene. I walked through those halls, looked at the quiet residents watching TV. The smell of bleach and sadness hanging in the air. A nurse offered me a pamphlet titled, "A Peaceful Retirement Awaits." I took it, folded it into my purse, smiled. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the house creak around me like it was whispering secrets. I thought about all the things I had given up. My body was tired, but my spirit, it was still alive. And I realized, maybe that toast was the blessing I didn't know I needed. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for them to see me and start seeing myself again. The next day, I took a walk down the street. My neighbor Lucas was trimming his hedges. He was in his 50s, kind, quiet, and always respectful. He had brought me groceries a few times during the winter. Once he fixed my back porch steps without even being asked. We started talking. I told him about the tour, the toast, the way my family had already written me off. He didn't laugh. He didn't pity me. He just listened. And then he said something that changed everything. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "You deserve better than this. You're not done living, Clarice." My name in his mouth sounded like a promise. Something fluttered inside me. Not romance, not yet, but possibility, hope, something I hadn't felt in years. He offered to help me if I ever needed a way out. I smiled, thanked him, said I'd think about it, but I already knew the answer. Over the next few days, I started making small changes, cleaning out drawers, sorting papers, packing only the things I truly loved. I didn't want to leave with anger. I wanted to leave with intention, quietly, like a whisper through the trees. No goodbyes, just absence. One evening, I opened the closet and stared at the dusty suitcase on the top shelf. I hadn't used it since my husband died. I pulled it down, unzipped it. The smell of old perfume and memories hit me like a wave. I packed slowly, carefully. 1 sweater, 2 books, a photo of me in my wedding dress, the letter my husband wrote me on our 40th anniversary, my favorite mug. That was all. Then I made one last call. To Lucas. I asked, "Are you serious about helping me?" He didn't hesitate. And that's when everything truly began to change. The night before I left, I sat on the edge of my bed and looked around my room like it was a stranger. Everything felt both familiar and distant, like an old friend you hadn't spoken to in years but still remembered the sound of their laugh. The walls had watched me grow old. The floorboards remembered every late-night pacing, every restless dream. I touched the dresser, the same one I used when I was pregnant with my first child. I could almost hear my husband's laugh echoing from the hallway. He would have hated what they were doing to me, and he would have told me to leave even sooner. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. Maybe because the grief had already passed through me like a long illness. What remained now was clarity, a clean burn. I was not running away. I was setting myself free. There's a difference. I wasn't abandoning my family. They had already abandoned me the moment they decided I was easier to manage than to love. Lucas came just after midnight. He didn't knock. We had planned it that way. The car was already running. Trunk popped open. He wore a navy jacket and jeans, like he was just another man out for a late drive, not helping a woman vanish from her own life. He smiled at me, softly, reassuringly, not the smile of a savior, just a man who understood what it meant to be caged. I handed him the suitcase, small and light, and locked my door for the last time. I left a note on the kitchen table. It didn't say much, just 3 lines. I am not dead. I am not lost. I am just finally living. I signed it with my name. Not Grandma, not Mom, not any of the titles they gave me. But Clarice, the name I had before they rewrote my identity into someone fragile and forgettable. I folded it next to the cake knife they had left behind. It felt poetic. As we drove away, the streetlights blurred into golden streaks across the windshield. I kept waiting for regret to settle in, like an unwelcome guest. But it never came. Instead, there was silence. Peaceful, humming silence. Lucas didn't talk much. He didn't ask if I was sure. He didn't ask where we were going. He just drove. Sometimes that's all a person needs. Not questions, just a road. And someone willing to travel it beside you. We crossed out of town by sunrise. The horizon looked like it was dipped in fire. I rolled down the window and let the wind bite my cheeks. It reminded me I was still here. That I wasn't a ghost yet. That there was breath in my lungs and time, however much or little, still mine to claim. I had no plan, no destination. But for the first time in years, I had choice. Lucas took us to a small cabin by a lake about 2 hours north. It wasn't fancy. Just 1 bedroom, a creaky floor, and a wood-burning stove that smelled like pine and smoke. But it was perfect. He told me I could stay as long as I wanted. No strings, no expectations, just rest. I believed him. There was a softness in his eyes. Like he too was tired of pretending the world was something it wasn't. We settled into a rhythm quickly. Mornings were quiet. Tea, fresh bread, sunlight pouring through the window like honey. Afternoons, we walked the trail behind the lake. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. But in those silences, I rediscovered something I hadn't realized I'd lost. Myself. Not the woman they called Grandma, not the one they pitied, but the girl who once danced barefoot in the rain, who sang while hanging laundry, who had dreams bigger than kitchens and casseroles. One night, about a week in, I asked Lucas why he had helped me. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the fire, poking it with an iron rod. Then he said, "You reminded me of my mother. She died in a home like the one they tried to put you in. She didn't want to go either, but she didn't have anyone. I wasn't there. I always wished someone had helped her run." His voice cracked on that last word. I placed my hand on his. Neither of us spoke after that. We didn't need to. But peace never stays quiet for long. One morning, I opened the news on Lucas's tablet. My name was there. Local grandmother missing. Feared dead after disappearance. There was a photo of me from my 80th birthday. The one where I wore the blue dress and forced a smile so wide. It made my cheeks hurt. They painted me as confused, vulnerable, as if I had wandered off and forgotten who I was. They said my children were devastated, that the community was searching, but none of them knew who I really was. Not anymore. I thought about calling them, just once, to let them know I wasn't dead, to say I was okay. But then I remembered that birthday, the toast, the way no one looked at me while they laughed. I remembered how invisible I felt, and I realized, if they truly cared, they would have seen me before I disappeared. They wouldn't need to search for someone they never looked at in the first place. Lucas told me we could stay hidden as long as I wanted. Change my name, cut my hair, start over. I told him I didn't want to disappear. I wanted to be seen, fully, honestly, without pity. That night, he brought out his camera. He said, "Let's take your picture the way you want to be remembered." I wore my favorite cardigan, the one with the stitched flowers. No makeup, no posing. Just me, looking into the lens like I was seeing the world again for the first time. And in that moment, I wasn't a grandmother. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't someone's problem to solve. I was Clarice, woman, alive, free. The world still didn't know where I was. But for the first time, I did. 2 weeks passed before I even thought about writing. It started with a scrap of paper from the drawer beside the cabin bed. I found an old pen, nearly dried up, and began scribbling words I hadn't said out loud in years. I wasn't writing to ask for forgiveness. I wasn't writing to explain. I was writing because the weight of silence was starting to grow teeth inside me, and I needed to let some of it out before it chewed through everything I had rebuilt. The first letter was to my youngest grandson. He was 12, the only one who still hugged me like he meant it. I wrote about how I used to sneak him extra cookies when his mother wasn't looking. How I remembered every birthday gift he ever made me with his tiny, clumsy hands. I told him I hoped he'd grow up kind, and that he'd never laugh at an old woman the way his parents did. I signed it, "Your grandma who loves you forever," and placed it in an envelope I'd never send. The second letter was to my daughter. It was longer, harder. I told her how much it hurt that she never once looked at me during that birthday toast. I reminded her how I held her during her fevers, how I braided her hair before school, how I stayed up all night sewing her prom dress because she didn't like the store-bought one. I told her I forgave her, not because she asked for it, but because carrying anger was too heavy and I wanted to walk light now. Then came the letter to my son. That one I burned. I didn't expect the act of writing to feel so final, like etching a name onto a tombstone. But in a way it was. These were goodbyes I was never allowed to say out loud. They were the last crumbs of the old Clarice being swept away. Lucas didn't ask about the smoke curling from the chimney that evening. He just poured us both tea and turned the radio on low. That night I slept like the dead and woke like the living. Every day after, I gave myself permission to do one thing I hadn't done in decades. I painted again. Lucas brought home a set of cheap acrylics and a canvas the size of a door. The first brushstroke felt like opening a window in a sealed room. I painted the lake. I painted the moon. I painted my husband's face from memory. I painted myself, not as I looked, but how I felt. Wild, scarred, alive. One morning, Lucas left a note on the kitchen table. "Gone to town. back by noon. But he didn't return by noon, or 2, or 5. The sun was nearly down when I heard the tires crunch on the gravel. When he walked in, he looked pale. Distracted. I asked what was wrong. He sat down, eyes heavy, and said, "They know. Your family? They've hired a private investigator. He's been to my place, asked questions." My hands went cold. It wasn't fear. It was fury. They hadn't come looking because they missed me. They came because losing control over me scared them more than losing me altogether. I asked Lucas what we should do. He looked at me for a long moment before saying, "Whatever you want. But we need to move. Soon." The decision came easier than I expected. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just nodded. We would leave. Start again. I had done it once. I could do it twice. The world was wide, bigger than the town that had caged me, bigger than their shallow love. That night, I opened the drawer where I kept the letters. I reread the one to my grandson. I added one more line. "Maybe someday, you'll find me in the stories they'll tell about the crazy grandma who disappeared. I hope they make me sound brave." I sealed the envelope and tucked it into a book of fairy tales I used to read to him. Maybe one day, it would find him. We left before dawn. Lucas had rented a van this time. He said it would be easier to blend in. We packed only what we needed. Clothes, paints, a few books. I left the cabin key under a rock by the steps. No note, no clue, just vanishing, like a ghost who finally found peace. On the road again, I watched the sky change, from pink to blue to storm gray. We drove through small towns, past diners and cornfields and broken fences. I thought about all the women like me, buried before they ever died, shoved into rooms that smelled like bleach, called sweet when they were sharp, called forgetful when they were simply ignored. Lucas asked where we should go. I said, "Somewhere they've never heard my name." He nodded. That night, we stopped at a roadside inn with chipped paint and kind silence. I stared at the mirror above the sink and didn't recognize the woman looking back. And I like that. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't afraid. She was a woman reborn from the ashes of her own forgetting. We got matching burner phones the next day. New names. I chose Claire. It wasn't far from Clarice, but it felt like a step forward. Lucas chose Matthew. I laughed when he said it. He said he'd always wanted to be someone new, too. That's when I realized I wasn't the only one running. He had ghosts, too. He just carried them quieter. We settled in a small coastal town 3 states over. Nobody knew us. Nobody asked questions. I started painting for the local cafe. Lucas fixed bikes. We lived in a tiny house with peeling shutters and a garden overrun with mint. And every day I chose freedom over fear, over and over again. But then, one afternoon, while arranging lemons at the market, I heard a voice I never thought I'd hear again. And my past caught up to me in the most unexpected way. It was a Tuesday, warm and humming with the kind of lazy sunshine that makes you forget the weight of the world. I had just picked out the ripest lemons, bright, heavy, perfect for tea, and was tucking them into my woven basket when I heard it, a voice behind me, low, familiar, sharp in a way that scratched through time like a nail on glass. I froze, my fingers still curled around a lemon. Then it came again. "Clarice, is that you?" My body reacted before my mind could. My spine locked, my breath caught. I turned, slowly, afraid of who would be standing there. And there she was, my daughter, standing in a sea of strangers like a misplaced memory. She looked thinner, older. Her eyes had that same calculating glint I remembered from that birthday. Half worry, half judgment. She took a step toward me, arms unsure of whether they should hug or accuse. I didn't speak. Neither did she, not right away. We stood there, 2 women carved from the same past, separated by choices no one ever expected to be permanent. Finally, she whispered, "We thought you were dead." Her voice cracked, but I wasn't sure if it was from grief or guilt. I tilted my head. "I left a note," I said. "Not for you." But I left one. She nodded, blinking fast. "I saw your picture, online. Someone shared your painting. I knew it was you. Of course, my painting. The one the cafe had proudly posted on their social media. A vibrant portrait of an old woman standing in a field of wildflowers, face tilted toward the sky. I had signed it Claire, but the style was unmistakably mine. I never imagined it would go far. But the internet has long fingers. Fingers that apparently reached all the way back into my past. She asked if we could talk. I said yes because running was no longer my answer. We sat on a bench near the sea. She told me about the search, the arguments, the theories, that my son had assumed I wandered into the woods and died, that my grandson had cried for weeks, that guilt had turned into obsession, that private investigators had followed 100 false leads. She looked at me then and said, "Why didn't you call?" I stared out at the water for a long moment before answering. Because none of you listened when I was still speaking. Because I had to disappear for you to finally wonder where I'd gone. Because I deserved to be more than a responsibility on a calendar. Her eyes filled, but I didn't stop. I had carried this too long to let it dissolve in a single reunion. She apologized, said she didn't know, that she thought she was doing the right thing, that they all did. I asked her what part of locking me away in a facility where no one visited sounded right to her. She had no answer. Just tears. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt hollow. Like the grief between us had already been spent. She wanted me to come back. Said there were lawyers involved now. That since I had disappeared, questions had been raised about my mental state. That if I didn't return voluntarily, there could be consequences. Her voice was quiet, but the message was loud. It was a threat wrapped in worry. A warning delivered with trembling hands. I shook my head. I am not property. I am not lost. I chose this. We parted with no hugs. Just a murmur of goodbye. She walked away slowly, as if she wasn't sure if she'd ever see me again. I watched until she disappeared behind the market stalls, her figure swallowed by the crowd. When I turned around, Lucas, Matthew now, was standing a few feet away. He had seen it all. Heard enough. I asked if he was scared. He said, "Only if you are." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying everything. Her face, her words, the way my past had arrived, not with sirens, but with sorrow. I thought about leaving again, vanishing deeper this time, changing names once more. But something inside me resisted. I was tired of being the one who always ran. Maybe it was time they faced the truth of who I had become. The next morning I wrote one final letter, not to my family, but to the lawyer handling my affairs. I declared my sanity, my autonomy. I included proof of my new life, photos, receipts, letters from the community. I wrote with clarity, purpose, and not a trace of regret. I was not a missing person. I was not mentally unstable. I was a woman who left a cage and chose freedom over tradition. Lucas mailed it for me. No return address, just courage sealed in an envelope. A week later, I got a response. The lawyer wrote back, surprised but understanding. He said there would be no legal action if I maintained distance, if I didn't try to claim anything from my estate. I laughed when I read that. Estate? I had left it all behind. The house, the money, the china set passed down through 4 generations. They could have it. I had no use for objects that anchored me to pain. Still, word spread. A few locals whispered when I walked into town. Some asked if it was true I had faked my death. I let them wonder. Let the rumors bloom like wildflowers in untamed fields. Let the myth of Clarice grow into something bigger than the woman herself. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of judgment. Not of being found. Because I had nothing to hide. Nothing to lose. And everything, absolutely everything, to reclaim. But just as I settled into that certainty, a letter arrived in the post. No return address. Just my real name. Written in handwriting I hadn't seen in over 30 years. And when I opened it, the truth inside changed everything I thought I knew. I stared at the envelope like it was alive. My fingers hovered above the paper, trembling. Not from fear, but from the sheer weight of recognition. That handwriting, slanted, elegant, unmistakably his. My heart stuttered. It couldn't be. I hadn't seen those loops and lines since the day we buried him. My husband, my Michael, dead for over a decade, buried in the cemetery behind Agnes Church with the white lilac tree. And yet here it was, a letter addressed to Clarice in the same hand I once kissed 1,000 times. For several minutes I couldn't open it. I held it like a fragile bone from an unearthed grave. I read my name again and again. Clarice. Not Mom. Not Grandma. Just Clarice. as if it had been waiting all this time for me to remember who I was. Lucas found me standing in the doorway, frozen. He looked at the envelope, then at my face, and quietly backed away. He didn't ask. He knew some ghosts weren't meant to be shared out loud. I finally opened it by candlelight, my hands careful, reverent. The paper was yellowed, aged but intact. It had been forwarded multiple times, judging by the stamps and markings on the back. It had traveled, like a lost soul trying to find its home. The letter inside was dated 2009, a year before Michael died. My breath caught as I unfolded it. Clarice, if you are reading this, it means you've found yourself again, and that's all I ever wanted for you. I'm writing this in secret because I know what's coming. The doctors are vague, but I can feel it in my bones. My time is shortening, and I can't leave without saying this. I saw it. I saw how they began treating you after I fell sick. I saw the way your light dimmed, the way they began talking over you, around you. Not to you. You never complained. You never said a word. But I saw it. You were always the strong one, Clarice. The fire, the heartbeat of this family. And I fear what they'll do to you once I'm gone. They will forget how much you gave, how much you built with your hands and your love. They will try to make you small, and you, out of loyalty, will let them. Please don't. If there ever comes a day when they laugh at your expense, when they plan your life without asking, when they look through you instead of into you, leave. Leave and do not look back. You owe no one your imprisonment. You've earned your freedom 1,000 times over. I've hidden some money in the old blue teapot wrapped in newspaper. Enough to give you a start. I hope you never need it. But if you do take it and run, live the life they forgot you had. And remember, I loved you before they ever called you mother. I loved you when you were just Clarice. Wild, brave, and free. Michael. The paper slipped from my fingers. My body folded onto the chair like it had been emptied. I wept, not from grief, but from being seen. Truly seen. Even after death, he had remembered me. Not the role, not the function, but the me I had buried beneath decades of service and sacrifice. I ran to the storage closet, dug through boxes and old quilts until I found it. The chipped blue teapot I had kept but never opened since he died. I held it to my chest, breathing like I had just surfaced from deep underwater. Slowly, I opened the lid. Inside, wrapped in pages of a 2008 newspaper, was a thick envelope filled with crisp bills. 10s, 20s, 50s, enough to vanish again should I ever need to. I looked at Lucas. He was standing silently by the door, watching me with gentle worry. I held up the envelope, eyes shining. My husband left this for me. He knew. He saw everything. Lucas didn't say anything for a while. Then he smiled and said, "He must have loved you more than anything in the world." And he did. I could feel it in every word of that letter. I read it 10 more times that night, each time discovering a new detail, a new permission I hadn't allowed myself before. I was not running from my family. I was answering my husband's final request, his blessing, his goodbye, his final act of love. The next morning I sat on the porch, letter in my lap, and made a decision. I wouldn't disappear again. I wouldn't run. Let them come. Let them try. I had proof of who I was. Proof that I was not unstable, not confused, not lost. I had love, and I had legacy. But just as I folded the letter one last time, another car pulled up the gravel path. A dark sedan with tinted windows. Lucas stepped outside, cautious. I felt a strange chill run through me. A man stepped out. Tall, gray suit, a folder in his hand. He asked for Clarice by full name. He said he was here on behalf of the estate. I stood up, walked toward him with the letter still clutched in my fingers. And what he told me next would shake the ground beneath everything I thought I knew about my own family. I stepped down from the porch slowly, heart thudding in my chest, like war drums. The man with the folder didn't flinch. His suit was too crisp, too precise. He looked like someone who made a living delivering endings. Lucas stayed a few feet behind me, arms crossed, jaw tight. I could feel the air shift between us. Something about this moment wasn't just official. It was personal. "Clarice Holloway?" the man asked, flipping open the folder. I nodded. He introduced himself as Richard Lennox, a lawyer from Whitman and Cross. His voice was smooth, trained, but behind the polite tone I sensed a storm. He said he was here on behalf of the Holloway estate and its legal trustees. Then he added words that nearly knocked me off my feet. I'm here regarding a contested inheritance and a sealed letter left in your name by your husband, Michael Holloway. Another letter? I blinked. My mouth opened, but no sound came. I'd barely processed the first one. Now this stranger stood on my doorstep with another thread from a man 10 years gone. Richard reached into his folder and produced a second envelope. This one was official, sealed with the same golden crest I remembered from our old family attorney. I took it with trembling hands. He stepped back, allowing me to sit. Lucas moved to my side silently. The envelope was heavier than expected. On the front, my name again. Clarice Holloway, my full name, in Michael's hand, with the same deliberate curves. My eyes scanned the bottom corner, dated 3 weeks before his death. The same period when he was barely walking. How had he written this? How had he kept it hidden? I opened it slowly. The first thing that fell out was a photograph. Michael and I from our honeymoon in Maine. I hadn't seen this picture in years. It was torn at the edge, worn soft with time. He was laughing. I looked so alive. And behind it, a single-page letter in his unmistakable hand. Clarice, if you're reading this, it means the family has finally dug deep enough to remember who built the foundation under their feet. I never trusted them with your legacy. They see you as fragile, but I see the fire. That's why I changed the will. You won't find your name in the documents they have. I had the real one sealed and stored with Lennox. This letter is your proof. You are the sole heir to everything I left behind. The house, the land, the accounts, even the copyrights on my published work. They'll be furious. Let them be. You gave your life to that family and they treated you like luggage. I won't let them erase you, not while I still have breath, or even after I don't. You have every right to walk away. But if you ever choose to fight, this is your sword, Michael. My vision blurred. The paper trembled in my hands as I read those words again. I looked up at Richard. He nodded. It's true. Your husband changed everything 3 months before his passing. Your children were never notified. He made sure of it. I was too stunned to speak. Not because of the money, not because of the property, but because once again, Michael had seen what no one else had. He'd prepared for a war I didn't know I'd be forced to fight. He knew. All along he knew. Richard explained that once my family discovered I was alive, they petitioned to assume control of the estate, assuming I had dementia, or worse. But my reappearance had thrown everything into question. Now, legally, I had 2 options. Step forward with the original will and claim everything, or let them continue, undisturbed, under the lie they built. Lucas spoke first. You can end it. Take back everything. But I didn't answer right away. That night I sat under the stars with the 2 letters in my lap, one written from love, the other from strategy, and in between them, me, a woman born from both fire and silence. I thought about the house, the family name, the land Michael had cherished. I thought about the betrayal in my children's eyes when they toasted to my death. And I thought about my grandson's drawing still folded in my wallet. I didn't want revenge. I wanted something deeper. I wanted to matter again. In the morning, I called Richard. I told him to initiate the claim, file the documents, trigger the hearing. Let them come. Let them try. I would walk into that courtroom not as a ghost, not as a grandmother, but as Clarice Holloway, the woman they never saw coming. He asked if I was sure. I said, I'm done being sure. I'm just ready to be real. Within days, the court date was set. I expected them to contest it. I expected resistance. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. A subpoena from my own daughter, claiming fraud, manipulation, coercion, that I had been seduced and influenced by Lucas, who she now referred to as the accomplice. Lucas laughed when he read it, but I didn't. I saw it for what it was. Desperation. They were losing control, and they were trying to claw it back with whatever tools they had, even if it meant painting me as unstable, and the man who saved me as a predator. The court case was only a week away, and in that time everything I'd hidden from was about to be dragged into the light. And I knew As I stood before that mirror, buttoning my blouse, this next chapter wouldn't just change me. It would expose everything they fought to keep buried. The courtroom smelled like old wood and forgotten promises. Polished benches, gray suits, silent watchers lining the walls like ghosts waiting for justice. I walked in wearing the blue dress Michael loved, the same one I wore on my 70th birthday. When he held my hand so tight, it left marks. I wore no makeup, no mask. I wanted them to see the woman they had dismissed, underestimated, buried beneath titles and expectation. My children were already seated. My daughter avoided my eyes. My son, jaw clenched, stared straight ahead like I was a stranger on trial for something unspeakable. Behind them sat their lawyers, polished and sharp, whispering strategies like vultures picking apart bones. And then there was Lucas, calm, steady, seated a few rows behind me, where he had always been, quietly supporting without demanding space. The judge entered, a woman, middle-aged, stern but not cruel. She read the charges first. A contest of inheritance, claims of mental unfitness, allegations of undue influence. It felt surreal to hear my life reduced to cold bullet points on a legal docket. I sat still, hands folded in my lap, listening as my daughter's voice filled the room for the first time in years. Not with affection, but with accusation. She painted me as lost, said I had always struggled since Michael's death, that I had become forgetful, irrational, that I'd fallen under the influence of a neighbor with questionable motives, that I had vanished, leaving the family in chaos, that the new will couldn't be trusted, not when it contradicted decades of planning. Her words were practiced, poised, and full of poison. My son backed her up. He claimed I had a history of confusion, that I once called him by his father's name, that I had forgotten birthdays, that I had started collecting things. Signs of mental decline, he insisted. I felt my heart harden with every word. They weren't defending me. They were erasing me. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly. My knees ached, but my voice did not waver. I told them everything. About the birthday toast. About the decision they made behind closed doors. About the silence that filled my home more than laughter. I told them how they didn't ask if I was okay. They assumed I wasn't. How they didn't offer help. They offered a cage. I spoke clearly. No tremble. No apology. Just truth. I told the court that my disappearance wasn't an accident. It was a declaration that I didn't wander. I walked. That I wasn't kidnapped. I escaped. That Lucas didn't manipulate me. He listened. Something my own blood had forgotten how to do. I pulled out Michael's letters. Both of them. I read them aloud. The courtroom fell quiet. No one could deny the handwriting, the passion, the foresight. Richard, my lawyer, passed around certified copies of the revised will, legal affidavits, and photos of me living my new life, painting, volunteering, walking by the sea. Not one showed confusion. Not one hinted at fragility. Just a woman reborn, stepping out of her own shadow. And when the judge asked if I had anything else to say, I looked at my children. I said I gave you my body, my time, my entire life. And when I asked for dignity, you offered me a locked door. This isn't about money. This is about memory, mine, and how you tried to steal it from me. They didn't look away, but their faces cracked. I saw the first signs of guilt slipping through their composure. My daughter's hand clenched. My son's lips twitched, uncertain. But the damage was already done. The judge recessed for deliberation. 2 hours passed in a blur. Lucas held my hand in the hallway. He didn't speak, didn't ask how I was. He just stayed beside me, a quiet promise. When the court resumed, the decision was brief but final. The judge ruled in my favor. The will stood. The estate returned to me in full. The accusations dismissed as unfounded, insulting, and unsupported. But it wasn't victory I felt. It was mourning. They never asked how I felt. Never admitted what they did. They simply stood, gathered their things, and walked past me like I wasn't real. My daughter brushed against my shoulder, her perfume triggering 100 memories. But she didn't stop. My son paused for just a second. His lips parted as if to speak. But then he didn't. They left, just like I once did. Outside the courthouse, the sky was overcast. I stood on the steps, the wind tugging at my sleeves. Reporters tried to approach, cameras flashing, but I waved them off. I wasn't here to be a story. I was here to reclaim one. That evening, I returned to the house I once called mine. The front door was locked. Dust clung to the porch like ivy. I didn't go inside. I just stood there, staring at the walls that had held so much joy and so much silence. Then I turned away. Back to Lucas. Back to the coast. Back to the life I had chosen, not the one chosen for me. And as we drove away for the final time, I thought the story was over. But a week later, a knock came at our door, and standing there was someone I never thought I'd see again, holding a suitcase, eyes red, and a single sentence that changed everything. And that's how I reclaimed not just my name, but my life. I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who fear your independence the deepest. They tried to silence me, contain me, erase me. But I chose to live out loud, with dignity, with purpose, and on my own terms. If you're watching this and feeling invisible, please know your story isn't over. You're not too old, too lost, or too late. You are still you, and that's more than enough. If you made it all the way to the end, drop a comment saying, "I see you, Clarice," to let me know you're still here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another story like this one.